Welcome to Podcast Answers, the show where I help you start and grow your podcast, answering any podcasting questions along the way. That's right, this episode is no different. We are going to be talking tonight a little bit about what happens when you are in a natural disaster area. So talking a little bit about things like we've seen tornadoes, we've seen hurricanes lately. And so I wanted to chat a little bit about that and talking about what you should do if you are in the hurricane area, because you never know when your podcast may be interrupted and you don't want to lose your audience. So that being said, what are the very, very, very first thing that I'm going to have you do, and I think you should do, is you should try and update your audience. The cell phone may not work. You may not be able to get to your cell phone. Your cell phone may not have service. You may not have battery at your house. So the very first thing that I think that you should be doing is somehow updating your audience. If that means just a quick update via social media, that means a quick update via social media. But it may also mean that you are able to send out an actual episode. So we'll talk a little bit about that on this episode today. But you may not have service at your house to get anything out to them. So one of the good things that you can do is listen to the radio or talking to others. You might be able to find some service somewhere. I know some people who were in the latest hurricane and they were able to talk to people, and they were saying that the radio, the actual radio waves, were actually a really good help in the hurricane, because they were able to actually hear where people had different things that they had. They were able to say, okay, this is where you can find cell service, this is where you can find internet service. And so they were able to actually go about doing that. And so hopefully you're able to do that. Talking to other people, you might be able to find a glimpse of where there might be an actual good internet service for you to be able to go out and update your listeners. So hopefully you have an email list that you can send emails out to. So if you don't have an email lists are super important. They are ways that you can go ahead and have your list, your subscribers subscribe. And the great thing is, it doesn't have to be just trying to sell something. You can say, hey, remember, we're going live tomorrow and we would love to have you join. And so that is one way that you can or one good thing about an email list is you can see when you can have people join. You can do that. So you have a way to contact your people if all else fails. An email is quick and it can get it's pretty small, and so it doesn't take a lot of internet. So hopefully you have an email list. If not, definitely start one today. But send it out an email, send out updates to social media, just some sort of a quick, hey, this is what's going on. I'm in the middle of a natural disaster. I have no internet right now, so updates are going to be late. You don't want to let your people hang. So that's really the key here, is you don't want your listeners, you don't want them to be able to lose track of what you're doing. You don't want them to be just left hanging without an episode, especially if it could be 2-3 weeks. And if you're putting out an episode every week, then that could be something where you need to just put out your quick episode and say, hey, I'm going to be out of commission for just a little bit because of this natural disaster that's going on. And so you can send out your emails, your social medias, let people know what's going on. Tell them the details, that you may not make some upcoming episodes because of this. You don't know when your power is going to come back on, things like that. It could be also good to have a friend in another location with access to your social media /email/hosting provider. So by that, I mean, have a trusted person in the area. So it may, obviously may not be you. I mean, it wouldn't be you, but somebody else maybe in a different state that you trust, that you can say, hey, John, I really need you to log into my social media and let people know that it's going to be okay. That I'm just going to be out for a little bit because I'm having a natural disaster in my area. And so I really need you to go ahead and contact my social media group, my email group, or whatever, and maybe even a way to put out a small episode. You could even have a pre-recorded episode saying, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to put this episode out because of the fact that I've got this natural disaster going on." And so you can have your trusted friend put those things out for you. That way you can still get your episode out. Your people can still listen to what they're going to be listening to. They can still know that you're still alive and that you're not going to be going anywhere, and that you are coming back, and things like that. So that's probably the easiest, best thing, is if you can have your trusted friend, again, in another location, another area that has the keys to the kingdom, if you will. And again, maybe they're not putting out the whole episode. Maybe they're not going to be doing everything for you, but they can at least update your social media saying, "Hey, this show won't be out for, who knows, because we've actually got a natural emergency going on," and things like that. So another good thing to do is pre-plan for your emergency episodes. So you can do that in a couple different ways. And the one thing is you can batch record episodes. So pre-record several episodes to have a backlog that you can release in case an emergency arises. Upload them to your podcast host platform you probably wouldn't want to do scheduled release dates now because you don't know when that's going to happen. But you can have it ready to go and uploaded to your media host, and then just set as like a draft episode. And then in this case, you have an episode ready to go, and then you can ask your friend in the other state, "John, hey, go in and release these episodes for me because I'm not going to make it and I don't know when I'm going to make it." So batch recording episodes. And again, this helps really if you have evergreen content, meaning that your content is something that's going to be good no matter when you listen to it, because some episodes, if you're doing like a news episode, that's going to get stale pretty quickly, or could get stale pretty quickly, because you don't know, the news may be going, the news may be stale news by the time you go and actually get your episode placed, because you're batch recording all of these episodes. But you can use evergreen content, record content that isn't going to be time sensitive, so it can be used at any point. So some of examples like this are Q&A sessions, like best of highlights or other educational segments that don't have a time frame on them. I like the Q&A sessions because those are good all the time. You can go back and listen to those, because you're going to say, "Hey, these are some questions that you, the listeners, have, and here we're going to answer them." So some other things that are just good general kind of preparedness to have when you are going to be talking about things in an emergency. So having alternative power sources. So I like portable battery banks, and if you are not familiar with them, they're just a battery bank that you can plug in your phone into. Invest in a high capacity power bank for your phone and possibly even your small recording equipment. I know for me, the Rodecaster Pro does allow me to power it by a battery bank. It has to be a specific battery bank, and it has to be a specific power delivery that it's going to be delivering. But I can actually power the Rodecaster on that, and so I would be able to actually record an episode. Now, I wouldn't be able to do all of the video and all of the other stuff that I'm doing right now, but I would be able to actually get by and do an episode. I would be able to actually record an episode and possibly even release it. So portable battery banks are key. I would have 2 or 3 of those around, have them charged up, use them. Now, you're going to want to use them, because if they're just charged up, they will kind of go bad, and you don't want to do that. So use your power banks. You might have to refresh them every year, get new ones every year. So you have these portable power banks that you can use and to charge your small things like cell phones, because you can use minimal equipment, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you can use minimal equipment to record your episode, and that would include things like your cell phone. And so you can do that with your portable battery banks. Now, also invest in a solar charger. They're a great option for extended outages, and you never know how long you're going to be without power. It may just be a couple hours, it may be a few days, it may be a few weeks. So solar chargers. Now, I'm going to caution you a little bit. I know that there are some portable power banks that actually have solar chargers in them. I would recommend staying away from those because the solar panels that are in those are not going to be high enough capacity that it would take you several days, if not several weeks, to actually charge them back up. You can get a larger solar panel and it can be still kind of portable. I have one that's like 8.5 by 11, like a sheet of paper, but then that folds out into like 5 different panels, and it has a USB-C on the back of it, and I can actually just plug my chargers into that and charge my battery banks back up. So that's great in combination with the portable power banks because it allows you to actually have that charge those back up once you've depleted them. And it can take a whole day to do that, but a whole day you can have your battery bank plugged in, then at night plug your phone in, charge your phone back up, and you're not without power on your phone, which is great, not even just for your podcast, because it is good to be able to use those small equipment to put out your podcast, but it's also good to, in case you get stuck where you can actually still communicate. Now I know some of the newer iPhones can communicate via satellite, so that's also good, but it's those things that will help you stay in contact that'll help you be able to do this. So the other last thing is getting a backup generator. So you can have a gas powered generator, whether that be your whole house generator or just a small, you know, gas one that can power things for a little while. That'll allow you to at least keep up your things like your refrigerator and things like that. But it'll also allow you to charge those portable power banks, and then you can go ahead and get your equipment back up and running. Now, one of the things that is kind of important to note is if your cell phone if there's no service in the area, the best thing you can do is actually go into airplane mode, because then you will actually save your battery longer. Because if your cell tower is on, if it's not in airplane mode, it's going to actually try and go out and search for a signal. And if it can't find one, it's going to keep doing that. And that radio actually uses a lot of power. And so you actually, if you're not connected to a cell tower, delete it, turn it off, go to airplane mode. So that way you don't end up using all of your power for that. And so if you go into airplane mode, your phone can actually last for a long time. Especially you can do that and then, check again in an hour or 2 hours to see if you have service again, and then you can go off of airplane mode and you'll be able to actually then use your phone. Now, I did mention recording using minimal equipment. And so you can use your smartphone or your tablet to record directly to your phone if you can't access your regular setup. So for me, I have a Rodecaster Pro that I'm using here with my mic, and it allows me to do my music and things like that. But you don't have to do that, especially if you're putting out an emergency episode where you're just trying to get an update. So for instance, for the podcast that I was listening to earlier, where the one co-host was without power, she was in North Carolina and didn't have power or cell phone signal or whatever, all of that. She used her voice memo and was able to get up to the one location in town that had a little tiny bit of internet, and was able to upload that over to their other co-host, that then they could bring that into the show. And so at least that their listeners got an update from her where she was at, what she was doing, and how she was actually surviving and things like that. So you can use your smartphone or your tablet to record directly into that. And you can do that simply with using your built-in mic on your computer or on your phone, as well as the Voice Memos app. That works really well. And so you can just use the Voice Memo app. It can do short episodes or updates. Many modern smartphones have surprisingly good built-in microphones. And so you can even get that or a compact USB mic that you can plug into it and, still do slightly better quality than just your cell phone mic. Although, again, modern cell phones have really good mics in them. So you can do a decent episode. Now, again, I wouldn't do this for your whole production. I wouldn't continually do this, but if you are going to be doing this for an emergency episode, that will actually get by. You can actually use the cell phone, and it's not that big of a deal. You can also use things like Zoom too. Like an app like Zoom, you can record your audio in it. You can go right into a meeting. You can record your audio to it and have that from Zoom, and it gets pretty decent quality. It's going to do a lot of the background noise removal, and you're going to be okay there. So the other thing you can do is also use an app called like Fairwrite, Ferrite, and that app is something that I'm using on my iPad. I have it on my iPad and my phone actually, and you can not only record in it, but you can actually produce an episode. You can edit your episode right down to it. You can export it as an MP3. You can tag it. You can put your cover art on it and everything, and then you can actually, if depending how you're doing it, you can actually upload that to your podcast host if you have internet access. So Fairwrite is a great alternative if you can't get to your normal podcast equipment to do the recording. And then if you haven't checked it out, I did an episode a while back, and I'll link to it in the show notes about like doing it on the road, doing an episode on the road. And so that in that case, I was or actually I think I called the episode Out in the Field. And so in that episode, I was actually at the state or the county fair, and I was recording an episode and editing it all on my phone and uploading it. And I did that. There are some pitfalls and things to watch out for that. So there are 2 episodes that I did. If you want to go back and check those out, those will be in the show notes, just a swipe or tap away. And you can go ahead and test those out. The other thing you can do is using like scheduling and automation tools. So if you are able to pre-schedule, you're able to do that with like emails. You can pre-schedule emails and social media posts. They can go live even if you don't have power. And the key to this is, again, now you are going to be able to maybe not have a lot of time to do this. You are not going to be able to know that you're going to be without power probably, because you don't know when a natural disaster is going to hit. But let's say you're able to quickly record a few episodes, a few thoughts down. You can do that on your cell phone. You can do that on whatever equipment you have. And then let's say you do find a place that does have power. You can go back and schedule all of your emails, your social media posts, even your feed to drop your episode. So you can do things pretty easily like that, scheduling ahead of time. So let's say you get a bunch of them. Maybe you go to town and you upload 3 or 4 episodes at once because you don't know when you're going to come back online. And then let's say you do come back online and you have 3 weeks of content, but you come back after 2 weeks. You can go ahead and delete those so they don't go out. But if you're not online, then you can actually have those go out automatically. Now, I use for my scheduling of social media posts, I just use business.facebook.com, which allows me to schedule my Instagram and my Facebook posts. And then twitter.com, if you go to twitter.com, if you're on Twitter, you can schedule the post right there on that. And so you're able to kind of pre-do your media stuff and pre-do that. So at least you're still having that contact with your audience, that you can still post to your audience. Now, another thing you can do in an emergency is you can collaborate with other podcasters. So if you're unable to publish an episode, reach out to fellow podcasters who might be willing to share a quick update or even host an episode for you on your behalf. So, there's definitely, at least in most industries, there are other podcasters who are doing shows similar to yours. I've got other podcasters in my industry, with the podcasting industry, that do shows about podcasting. I could reach out to those people. I could ask them if they'd be willing to do an episode for me or whatever, so they could record on my behalf. And then again, either send it to me and I can get that out to one of, maybe I can get up to the local place that actually still has internet, or I can go, to contact my friend, the one I talked about in the beginning of this episode, and say, hey, here's this file. It's on this drive. Will you post this for me? Because I'm not able to make it I'm not able to get out there and post this. And the person, XYZ podcaster in my industry did an episode for me. Can you post this for me? So again, it's always helpful to have more than just your podcast production flow, so that way you can actually do this. Also, consider you can have even guest host, maybe where you can appear on other people's podcasts as an update for your audience. So again, maybe you have several different podcasts in your industry. There's for this case, there's in podcasting, there's Pod News, there's Podcasting 2.0, there's Future of Podcasting. There's a bunch of other shows out there that talk about podcasting. And I could reach out to one of them and say, hey, here's a quick voice memo update. Can you update my audience on your feed and say, hey, I'm around. This is what's going on. Like, here's how I'll be back shortly or whatever. So the other thing too is the last thing I would say too, one of the last things is go ahead and create an emergency plan for the future. So evaluate potential risks to your specific location. Is it hurricanes? Is it earthquakes, etc.? I know I live in the Midwest, and tornadoes come quite a bit here, or at least there's the potential of it depending on the season. And so for me, that means that maybe I need to prepare for when the power might be out because of bad storms coming through. Luckily, we haven't actually had that happen a lot in our area where the power's been out for an extended amount of time. But if it is, what would I do? What would I do for this episode? What would I do for this show? Well, good news for me, my work actually has a whole building generator that runs on natural gas. And so in the event of the actual power just being out, I could still probably produce my episodes there. If I had to take my gear there and do an episode, I could. Now, maybe the internet might not be there, but I could still produce my episode there if I needed to. Again, that is if the building is still there. But I need to evaluate the potential risks. And again, in my area, storms and power outages due to tornadoes may be or is a threat. Again, luckily I haven't had to deal with that in a while, but they are a threat. The other thing to do is store backup equipment. So like maybe a handheld recorder or spare batteries specifically for emergency use. So handheld recorders are great. You can get lots of different kinds of handheld recorders. Roland makes a handheld recorder. It's an Edirol R2. It's an older device, but it works well for this. It also, it has a couple mics on it, and it has an SD card that you can just record directly onto it. Your episodes are going to be raw. They're not going to have a whole lot of production content to them, but you can, if you store that, put that in a case, keep the batteries separate, never put your batteries together in the devices because they will corrode, but store extra batteries, store extra things like that you can have on hand. So that way you can things like a handheld recorder, again, so that you can create your episode in case you need it. Also, back up your important audio files and project files on a cloud service like Google Drive or Dropbox for easy access from any devices if you have to relocate temporarily. For me, the good thing is I bare bones, I have my laptop, which has all my stuff on it that I can quickly grab and move and take out here with me. I could easily unplug my Rodecaster if I needed to and take it with me. I wouldn't have everything like my teleprompter and my monitors in front of me, my Stream Decks, but I could easily take it and relocate if I needed to. But sometimes I might need it. It's a good thing to have all of those audio files backed up. Now, I mentioned that software called Ferrite. That's a great software. And the cool thing about it is you can actually put all of your audio files in it. So, for instance, I have this as my beginning, kind of music file for this podcast. I can put that in Ferrite app. So it's easy for me to drop in. So even if I just record quickly on the iPad or my phone, I have those media files with me so that I can kind of create a polished episode if I need to. Again, it's great. And then that also works well if you have something like a Google Drive where you can give access to that for somebody else. So let's say you do make an episode somehow. How are you going to get that to Johnny over in Texas? Think about those things. Johnny not only needs to know how to get into your show and post it, maybe you need to create an account for him on your media server, but you also have to give him access to your Google Drive or whatever so that he has access to those digital assets that he can go ahead and make the episode for you or post the episode for you. But how are you going to get those files from place to place? And again, having all that stuff in Google Drive is handy because it allows you to then go and actually send those to people and do what you need to do, or have them with you if you need to go to a quickly to a different computer. So also use the expertise as content, or the experience, sorry, not the expertise, the experience as content. Once it's safe and feasible, consider turning your experience into an episode. Document how you adapted, what you learned, how your listeners might prepare, sharing real life resilient stories, and deepen your audience connection. So that's really what I took, and actually that's where I got the idea for this episode from. I mean, luckily I've never had to do this. I've never had to adapt my podcast. I've never had to do an emergency service for my podcast. But Elsie Escobar from the feed did. And the one thing I appreciated is, so again, she used her voice memos app on her phone. She sent that to her co-host, Rob. He dropped it into the episode. And then the next episode where she was back and everything was okay, she went over it. She said, this is what happened. And for her, one of the things that she found to be helpful, or she found out in this case, is that when everybody's out of the internet, how do you get that data to and from? Like, how do you, not just like your podcast data, but information on what's going on, information on how do you get that information? How do you figure out where you can maybe find the internet? How do you do that? In her case, she found out that the radio, the FM radio, was the local radio station, was a huge content for information, because people were just calling in and saying, hey, this is the experience that I'm experiencing. This is the, this is what I need, this down here at this corner of this place. I need this. I have this if you need it. It was a great exchange for information. But she also said, you know what I'm going to do in after this? I'm going to become a ham radio operator, because in this case, ham radio would have been just as helpful, because ham radio would have still worked. So she used her experience as content for the next show that she was on. And you can do that too. So again, to go over and kind of recap what I've been talking about in this episode, because again, natural disasters happen, is first and foremost, contact your listeners once you're okay and say, hey guys, I'm going to be without power for I don't know how long. You may not see an episode from me, but I am okay. That way, when they all of a sudden don't hear from you, if they're used to hearing from you every week or every other week or whatever, they're still able to get that information. They're still able to know what's going on. And also, pre-plan for emergency episodes. Have some emergency episodes on hand. Think about your alternative power sources. How are you going to power some equipment? And again, I know probably your first and foremost thought is not going to be podcast equipment, but probably your refrigerator and things like that. But how are you going to be able to get that information out? How are you going to be able to power your cell phone? Because even if you don't have service, your cell phone is super handy, and you're probably going to find yourself taking notes and recording things, because that's where, that's about all you have to do. Have your alternative power sources, whether that be a power bank, a solar charger, a backup generator, and then also, using minimal equipment to get your podcast episodes out. Again, it may just be the Notes app on your phone to get some information out to whoever it needs to get out. Maybe you even have something like a Discord server that you can update and things like that. Remember to use scheduling and automation. Have all of that set up and ready to go if you can batch record your episodes if you're going to be down for a while. And then again, create your plan for the future. Have it ready to go. Have some things ready to go in case of an emergency. And then also use the experience as content. That way you can let your listeners know on an update. It may not have anything to do. Again, your podcast may not have anything to do about podcasting and that, but your content, you can still use that content in real life. So guys, what are your thoughts? Have you had to go through a natural disaster? Have you had to go through a natural disaster? Contact me. I'd love to hear it. you can go to podcastanswers.com/contact and leave me a message and let me know what you've had to do in a natural disaster. How do you have you got your podcast? How have you survived this show? And then also, if you want help starting your podcast, that's a great place, or even producing your podcast. I help people produce podcasts. I can be that trusted friend in the other state. If you want me to produce your podcast for you when you're out, I can be your emergency contact. I can be your emergency person that produces your show for you while you're out. You give me the content. Again, that you can contact me at podcastanswers.com/contact. I would love to hear that. I would love to be that for you. So contact me and we can definitely do that. Thanks again, guys. If you have any questions that you would love covered on this show, again, I'm going to say it one more time. podcastanswers.com/contact will get you to that place where you can contact me and let me know what you want me to cover on this show. Guys, until next time, keep podcasting and stay safe.